You know, a person who is resting peacefully on their deathbed can hear absolutely everything around them. They can hear for several days at the very minimum. And when people spend 3 days reading prayers and mantras next to their ear, for the former person, the inner soul and the consciousness, which can no longer respond in any way, the hearing channel still maintains a vital connection with the outside world. Only the hearing channel remains, and they hear everything clearly. And at that moment, you can say to them what is important, calm them, guide them, and so on. There are entire practices devoted to this. For example, the Bardo Todol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, describes how to guide a person into the spiritual world after death, and so a mantra is whispered or spoken into their ear. This is also a spiritual practice.
How would you comment on this video? What can you say about this?
You see, on the one hand, what he is describing does take place, but he presents it as if this applies to everyone, and that's complete nonsense. No, this won't work for everyone. But quite obviously, if a person is carefully preparing for such a spiritual practice, if they perform certain rituals and specific exercises and truly understand what will happen at the very moment of their death, for example, they go to a monastery, practice there for some time and are fully aware of what is going to happen, then yes, this can definitely happen, as it is a very real process. This does take place, and that is completely and fundamentally correct. There are specific spiritual techniques and ancient practices. There are such rituals where the specific part of human consciousness experiencing the moment of death is helped through sacred mantras, through resonant vibrations, to stabilize, to find peace, and to be carefully guided. Such things do happen. But if you try to do this with just anyone, most likely nothing will come of it. Because the horror of what is happening, the unexpectedness of what is happening, the specific things that a person experiences in that state absorb their entire attention so completely that they no longer perceive any physical signals from the body at all, in principle. So, when considering the idea that this process works for absolutely everyone, no, it does not work for everyone. But this does take place. Yes, that's absolutely right. Furthermore, these specific types of techniques can also be used by those who are referred to as the dead, who, thank you, do everything they can to avoid ending up in the Bardo space and try to jump back into the body, also through the use of mantra and through ritual. This process can be achieved, once again, by a well-prepared person. For someone who has trained in advance, doing all this is simply a matter of routine. When you engage in practice with your living body, you realize with absolute clarity that you are not dying right now. And it's a completely different matter when you are actually dying, and this is no longer a training exercise. It's the same as, for example, when you practice with a rubber knife that someone is poking at you, and you know perfectly well that if you don't block it, nothing will happen, nothing terrible will occur. And it's a completely different story when somewhere out on the street some thug is poking you with a real knife. You react in a totally different way. You might do everything perfectly in the gym, but out on the street, in an extreme situation, you could just stand there paralyzed and be unable to do anything. To prevent this from happening, so that a person who practices has a much better chance. There are indeed such rituals, that's absolutely right. But let me repeat, these are specific cases described for practitioners. These are cases described for those who are actively preparing for this. And naturally, this simply won't work for someone who has just lived their life in an ordinary, everyday and routine way. And if, on their deathbed, someone starts reciting something into this person's ear, it's most likely not going to work. But
you say that this work is for those who are preparing for it. But is there a specific point in time when one should begin the process of preparing for death? For example, from the age of 15, or earlier, or later? Is there a certain moment when we begin? Or is it perhaps a certain kind of process that maybe starts from a particular conscious period of life? Well, in general, tell me about this.
You know, I can tell you two distinct and very different pieces of information on this topic. For example, there is the ancient book known as the Maha Nirvana Tantra. And there, in plain black and white, it is explicitly stated that it is assumed a person immerses themselves deeply in meditation, withdraws from the world, leaves society behind, and begins to prepare for their final departure once they have reached the age of 75 years old. But there is the harsh reality that people sometimes don't even live to 75, so what are we even talking about in that case? Personally, by carefully observing where I ended up, exactly what is occurring around me and how it happens to other people, I started preparing for this from the moment I realized that it is inevitable, that it will happen to me. And that was back in my early years of my childhood. When I was growing up, I had a specific event in my childhood. Actually, there were 3 distinct events that simply, as a very clear and obvious fact, gave me the unique chance to experience, fully realize, and truly feel. That death is an absolutely inevitable and natural process for everyone. And from an early age, I began a journey to deeply examine myself, to study the world around me, and to understand what is actually happening here, so that when it eventually happens to me personally in my own life, I will already be fully prepared for it. But let's be honest, now I'm far from being a child, I'm already quite old, and I still can't honestly say that I'm ready. It's impossible to prepare for this. Impossible. But you can do everything that's within your power, and that increases the chance of a conscious further movement. For me, conscious movement is not even about death, it's the body of light, it's departure from here. I strive for this, I put in every effort I can, everything that's within my power. There are people who also like this kind of goal. This goal motivates them. They move forward together with me. We practice, we train. There are many ways we interact and organize these practices. The same closed practice club, all sorts of events, retreats, off-site practices. We will have many exciting events planned for this year and into next year. All of this is already planned and we are preparing for everything. So we train, we exercise, and every single person has their own specific age. That is, when they suddenly realize, damn, I'm truly going to die. What should I do there? Where will I end up? And how is it all really going to be? And it is precisely the practices, the very trainings, what I demonstrate, that allow you to experience all of this while still alive. So that when all of this actually happens for real, at the very least, it won't be a surprise for you. Although I can't say that there comes a moment when you sincerely say, that's it, I'm ready. It's not. There will always be some doubts, there will always be some thoughts like, what if I missed something? What if I left something unfinished? But over time, you begin to develop a profound and resilient state of inner strength. And this state is developed not just when you practice, but when you actually and actively apply all of these principles in your life. It happens every single time you successfully surpass your own personal limits. When every time you step into some territory where you find yourself for the first time in your life and you are forced to act there. When you find yourself in a situation that is completely unfamiliar to you and for the first time in your life, it is through these processes, among others, that a person prepares for departure. Again, if this happens suddenly, if it happens without preparation, it's just a corpse. And your very own sense of perception, as well as your internal consciousness, is squeezed out into the bardo space. What happens next depends on what you manifest there. In most cases, people manifest panic, fear, and terror there. Accordingly, this leads to the cessation of consciousness, crystallization, and transformation into a small black crystal. This is what happens in most cases. But if a person who ends up in the bardo space is able to manifest divine qualities in the form of a vibrational state. Yes, right now we're not talking about something trivial. I've explained this topic quite well in the masterclass, The 5 Divine Qualities. It's explained even better in the courses. Practical energetics, levels 1, 2, and 3, from all sides, with different facets, different practices, and different approaches. And so the ability to experience these states, to demonstrate them, to remain in these states, that is what will determine where your fragment of consciousness will move next from the bardo space. However, there are practitioners who direct their practice so as not to enter this space at all. That's how deeply they are horrified by this process. And in fact, the rhythmic chanting of these ancient mantras into the ear of a person who is passing away can also serve as sacred rituals that help the soul avoid entering that specific space. This is not the only practice, there are many, but it can be one of them.
Anton, what is it that drives people's interest in this topic? Death? Because, some people aren't interested in this at all. They've never had any near-death experiences. Like you said, you had different experiences in your childhood when you actually came into contact with death and were very close to it, saw it. But some people aren't interested in this at all, have never been interested. It doesn't bother them whatsoever. That's it. What does it depend on?
It really depends on what you strive for, what you want to fully comprehend and what you want to learn. It wasn't just a brief encounter for me. During my early childhood years, I actually managed to experience the profound state of dying on 3 separate occasions. The very first time it happened, when I was still just a young child, I was suddenly struck by a bolt of lightning. I simply fell completely unconscious, and while my physical body was lying there in that state, I experienced all sorts of extraordinary processes far outside of the physical realm. The second time I choked and essentially drowned, but in the end, fortunately, everything turned out okay. Once again, I found myself going through all of those different states. Clinical death. And there was another moment during my practices when I left my body and my body stopped breathing. I've talked about this. I have videos on my YouTube channel where I share all these stories. Within the context of telling my story, I described it all in quite some detail. And since childhood, I understood that this would happen. Yes, today I was struck by lightning, but at some point, for example, my heart will simply stop from old age. And there's nothing I can do about it. I'll still end up in that state. I'll still have to go through it. So I started looking for ways. What else can you do besides just waiting around until you die? Sure, you can try to forget about it and pretend it won't happen. Is that an option? That is an option. But that option didn't work for me. It seemed to me like a pretty weak position, just pretending that it won't happen. So I started to look into it. I started to resist that fact. I began searching for ways, for what else there is, what other options exist. And after decades, of course, I found all these options, learned about them, and was even initiated into many practices, which in fact is what I'm sharing and talking about now. Sometimes I notice comments under my videos where people ask, how do you know all this? What makes you say that? It's because I practiced for more than 10 years in a temple, in a tradition, a very ancient tradition. I spent days chanting mantras, I attended all sorts of rituals, and I went through many initiations. These initiations weren't just someone putting a red dot on your forehead in a group and saying you're initiated to the next level, like on an assembly line. That's not an initiation, that's just clowning around. A spiritual initiation is very much like a rigorous exam, like an entrance exam to a university, to graduate school, or anywhere else. That is exactly what an initiation is. They look at you. Are you even capable of moving forward? Do you meet the requirements? Do you meet the demands that are about to be placed on you? Or are you not capable? Or will you break down at the very first practice? At this moment, at the moment of initiation, the teacher, the master, the ashan, looks at you to see what you are made of. And it's not just his opinion or some kind of glance, his conclusion. It also contains a significant ritual aspect. Somewhere, again, I've told this in different stories. For example, the specific practice with a lemon. When you take a fresh lemon with your own hand, a lemon, the fruit, and carefully place it on the sacred altar with a very clear intention that you want to practice. You want to be a dedicated disciple, you want to enter the status of a sadhaka, and you truly want to join the kula. You place it there, and this lemon lies on the altar. And so, if after a full period of 15 days, this lemon turns into a completely solid and stone-like structure, then you have successfully passed the entire test on the physical level. This still doesn't guarantee you anything, but at the physical level, you have shown that you are something, that you represent something. And there are lemons that rot, that just fall apart into mush. And such people are weeded out, such people are let go to move on. That's what initiation is, real initiation. But when they just put a dot on you or whisper some sacred mantra into your ear, that is a bit of a different story. And so, when I went through all of this, when I experienced it all firsthand, and when I practiced it all myself, that's when I came out to people and said, look what I can do, look what I know. And a large number of people heard me. It turns out this is actually quite in demand in the modern world. I continue to do this, and I have no intention of stopping. At the same time, there are also many people who simply pretend that this will never happen to them. Somewhere deep down, on a subconscious level, you still understand that it will happen. And what are you going to do about it? And to hope that someone will whisper mantras into your corpse's ear and everything will be fine for you? Well, no. That's not how it works.
95% of people don't even realize that within them lies a power that grants access to any possibility, a successful business, strong relationships, health, and self-fulfillment. It allows you to hear your soul and remember your true nature, your divine nature. This power is your energy. When it is blocked, you feel tired and upset. But when your energy flows freely and without obstacles, you are full of strength and capable of achieving any goal. Everyone can feel the movement of energy in their body. Are you ready to see this for yourself right now? I've prepared a practice where, in just 3 minutes, you'll become aware of the state of your energy and be able to activate the inner power that has been blocked for many years. The practice is available for a limited time. Right now, follow the link provided below the video and unlock the incredible source of power within yourself.
I really like the story of your journey. At some point, you gave an interview. It's still on the channel, and maybe we'll attach a link to it here somewhere. That was an interview about your journey, right from the very beginning. Could you tell us exactly how you followed your own personal spiritual path, even before you finally met your teacher, your Ashan, and up to the present day? That's your entire journey. It's incredibly interesting. Friends, if you're interested in this topic, you can watch that interview. Let's get back to our topic. I'd like to ask you, what is a mantra? So, speaking in general terms, how does it work? Is it actually the specific meaning of the mantra that works? And is it important what is put into it? Or is it specifically the combination of these symbols, letters, and the vibrations that arise when a person recites the mantra that matter? Please tell us, how does it work?
There are many things that matter. Of course, it's the sound, the frequency, the vibration. But it's not just sound, frequency, and vibration. It's a sacred sound that was passed down to you directly by the ancient masters of the tradition. This is the very first and most essential key point, which many people unfortunately neglect. If you took this sound from a book where there is no actual sound but only letters, then no authentic spiritual transmission of the mantra has taken place. If you simply heard it somewhere on the vast reaches of the internet, it's far from certain that the person who pronounced that sound possesses a true living mantra. What is a living mantra? It is when this sound is connected with an energetic process. In other words, this sound is manifested on all levels. So what is sound? That is the physical level. When a person pronounces it only on the physical level and not on any other level, that is not the transmission of a mantra. You might as well sing a song or recite a poem with the same effect. But if a person, when reciting a mantra, also expresses it as an energetic process, if he burns with these vibrations, demonstrates these vibrations, and is in the states to which this mantra is supposed to lead, then a complete transmission of the mantra takes place. And the person who listens to this perceives and synchronizes with this process. He receives all the access keys. He can train this within himself. If you just write it down for him on a piece of paper, no transmission takes place. There are no settings. It won't work. This is one aspect of a mantra. There is another aspect of a mantra. Mantras are composed of bijas. Each bija has its own specific meaning, certain descriptions and settings. Naturally, highly experienced masters, practitioners, and ashanas can compose their own mantras, specifically tailored and customized for a person. This is done to adjust their energy into a more integrated and harmonious state. These practices certainly do occur in reality. There are mantras that were given to people by gods, that is, by more conscious and powerful beings. Are there such mantras? Yes, there are. And they actually already happen to contain a very particular and unique sequence of words, which is guaranteed to have certain specific effects. But if you received this set of words from a person in whom all of this is completely dead, in whom none of this is manifested, then this set of words will simply not work. But if you received it from a person who is passionate, in whom this mantra is alive, then, by and large, it doesn't fundamentally matter how precisely it is pronounced in terms of sound. Yes, of course, any practitioner strives to pronounce it as accurately as possible. But that's how it is. It's written in the scriptures. And I am telling you this with full responsibility. A modern person physically cannot pronounce the mantra exactly. Our physical bodies simply do not have such capabilities. We can only strive to approximate the correct pronunciation. And if a person's mantra is alive, then even just approaching the correct pronunciation, everything works perfectly. If the mantra is not alive, if a person's mantra is dead, no matter how well he pronounces it, out loud the effects will be, they are quite minimal, yes, there will be some, but they will be very weak and subtle. And this is not at all what people who are seriously practicing are engaged in. Of course, in my tradition as well, there are mantra practices. I have already demonstrated approximately 10 different mantras through a meditative state and through subtle vibrations. All of this takes place and is fully available to those dedicated individuals who practice with me in our exclusive closed practitioners club. After a certain period of time has passed, I'm not entirely sure when this will be aired, but as of today, soon there will be the transmission of two even more significant mantras. They are called stotras, which are entire songs or chants, and again we must not forget about the state and the energies. I received all of this from my teacher, from Ashan, who transmitted these mantras, these sounds and states, the energetic states that these mantras are meant to bring you into. That's when it all works.
So it turns out that in order to use a mantra, you actually need a certain level of practice, a very good sense of your own internal energy, and a clear intention with which you are going to use this mantra and for what specific purpose you are doing it. As far as I remember, when you transmit a mantra, you don't repeat it very often, even just once or a few times, because what really matters is the intention and energy that you put into it.
Well, it can be different. It depends on what we are doing. For instance, not very long ago, we traveled to Peru for our spiritual practices, where I shared deep knowledge about the 9 levels of the Sri Yantra. And there, every single day, we recited the exact same mantra, down to every individual sound and every single word. All of this was reiterated over many times. Yes, there are some of our meetings and practices where the mantra is used simply as part of the practice, as a process, and it is repeated once. That also happens. There are practices where I repeat the mantra in multiples of 3, that is either 3 times or 6 times or 9 times, and then we move on. So here everything depends on which specific practice we are doing. Naturally, the process of transmission is a one-time process. After that, it's just training.
There's also another interesting topic. In some religious traditions, even I would say in religious scriptures, it is recommended to repeat the names of God before death. And it is said that the last thought a person has before death influences where the soul will go next. What do you think? Does this make sense?
There is definitely meaning in this, because any name of God is in essence already a mantra, it is already a bija. But if no one has given you the transmission, then the bija they are just meaningless and empty words. And if we are being completely honest about it right before facing the end of life, it is not like you are ever truly prepared or ready to just sit there. And it's unlikely you'll be reciting a mantra like that. After all, it's a sound. It's not like you're just sitting there making things up in your head. So, on the one hand, of course, this has its place if you are trained and prepared, if the mantra is alive within you. But if the mantra is not alive in you, it won't become alive. So at the very least, you need to receive its transmission from someone who has already awakened their own mantra. There is such a word as parampara, which means the transmission of knowledge. I was in the parampara, I received this knowledge, and I can pass it on further. But if a person just once heard some names of God somewhere and tries to do something with that, it is very unlikely that anything will come of it. And one more thing, not the last thought. When a person ends up in the bardo space, the first thing they generate there will determine everything. And the likelihood that having entered the bardo space, you will remember the name of God. You won't even remember your own name when you find yourself in the bardo space. Which God? What are we even talking about? You need to prepare for this well in advance, to train, to practice, to go there while still alive, to get used to these states, to get used to these spaces.
So that you feel at home when you get there and already know everything, right? And
in the vast majority of cases, how does death happen? Just imagine for a moment that you are walking down the street, lost in your own thoughts, making plans for your future, and then suddenly you are teleported into a terrifying freefall directly above the mouth of a volcano. What exactly would you be thinking at that very moment in time? I should probably start repeating the names of God, right? No, you'll be terrified by what just happened. You won't be able to understand what's going on at all. What is this? How did I end up here? Why am I falling into a volcano? Who am I even? Where am I? What am I? You won't even have any time for coherent thoughts. What if you have already soared high over that crater? Perhaps because you have practiced something like the incredible ability to fly. Because when we are in those vast and open spaces, we can truly fly. But back here on the ground, we are constantly weighed down by the heavy and relentless force of gravity that pulls at us every single day. But there, we're not held down by gravity. And so, when you gradually get used to these states, you practice, you learn. People sometimes ask me, Anton, why do we need out-of-body experiences? I say, when are you planning to learn this? When you die or something? Well, there won't be any time for that there. That's it, slap, slap, bardo, your very first impulse, result. It all happens in an instant. You won't be able to linger. This illusion that I'll have time there, that everything will work out for me, why do you think everything will work out for you? For example, there's a record for lifting a barbell. Well, let's say it's 350 kilograms. I don't know exactly what the record is now. So someone lifted a 350 kilogram barbell. Now try to take that barbell from his hands. What will happen? Your arms will just get ripped off, that's all. Sure, someone managed to do it. It's the same thing here. When you read about the achievements of other people, when you read about the accomplishments of other practitioners, some yogis have attained the rainbow body, and when you read these stories and get inspired by them, it doesn't mean you're actually learning how to do it yourself. If you suddenly find yourself at the mouth of a volcano, you'll still end up falling into it, even if you didn't expect it. And it is only through personal experience, by personal mastery and individual skills, that these things become possible, to move there consciously. There's no other way.
Yes, once again, we are coming back to this important topic that you really need to start practicing right now.
Of course, of course.
Yes, the good news is that we have all the opportunities for this. There are master classes, courses, and practices. You always have so much going on, so many different events and activities. You can simply take all of this, use it, and live your best life. Friends, all the links to Anton's courses and all his products are provided in the link below this video.